It's interesting to think about you mentioned earlier on about going to the gym is right wing and liking fast cars is right wing and all the rest of it. The number of liberal women that are struggling, I think, to find an eligible partner is going up because they just can't find a guy that'll hold the door open for them, that'll treat them like a lady, that'll try and be the protector, provider, procreator thing. You go,
This episode starts off with one of the most unexpected cultural observations I've heard in a while. That going to the gym or liking fast cars is now somehow associated with right-wing ideology. Think about that. Basic self-improvement. Discipline and hobbies that used to be universal are suddenly political? That's wild. And it sets the tone for what becomes a deep, high-stakes conversation about modern masculinity, collapsing male education rates, and whether society is failing young men entirely. It's not just a hot-take fest. This episode is packed with stats, raw emotion, and perspective shifts. Keep watching, because this episode goes to places most conversations are too scared to touch.
Liberal women that are struggling, I think, to find an eligible partner is going up because they just can't find a guy that'll hold the door open for them, that'll treat them like a lady, that'll try and be the protector, provider, procreator thing. You go, you're talking about a conservative. You're talking about somebody who's more traditional in that way. And I get worried, I sort of talk a lot about this stuff on the show, and I get worried about not helping men to improve in this sort of zero-sum view of empathy, that if you give some attention to men and the way that they're struggling, that it takes it away from some other more deserving group. So a lot of the time, if someone's falling behind, 50 years ago, Title IX gets introduced, right, for women. There's not enough women in higher education. There's not enough women expediting them through socioeconomic status. 50 years later...
This section is quietly one of the most controversial. He's pointing out a serious paradox. A growing number of liberal, high-achieving women say they can't find partners who treat them like ladies, someone who leads, protects, provides. But here's the kicker. Those traits are often found in more traditional or conservative men, the exact type many of them claim to reject. That tension is real, and it's reshaping the dating landscape. As women rise economically, they're finding fewer men at or above their level. So here's the question. Do you think modern feminism accidentally made dating harder for the very women it tried to empower? Let us know what you think.
They've blown the fucking roof off the glass ceiling. It doesn't exist. 2 women for every 1 man completing a 4-year US college degree by 2030. Women earn way more than men do in their 20s. Way more. And now, it's going to be difficult for you to find an eligible partner as you begin to climb up your own socioeconomic ladder, as you get higher and higher up. You look across and there are fewer and fewer men over there. And what you think is, okay, well, typically, if a group is falling behind in society, we don't tell them to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. We spend billions of money in taxpayer-funded charities and think tanks to try and work out what's going on and to try and bring them along for the ride.
This is one of the most mind-blowing stats in the entire episode. By 2030, there will be 2 women graduating college for every 1 man. That's not a small gap. That's a cultural earthquake, and it's already happening. Here's what's so important. When women were behind, society adapted. We funded programs, changed laws, created support systems. But now that men are falling off a cliff, nothing. Just silence, or worse, mockery. Why is that? Why do we celebrate one group's rise but ignore another's decline? If education is the new currency, young men are going broke, and nobody's ringing the alarm.
That's not happening with men, because vestigially for so long, men had it so good.
Yeah.
And now it feels like twisting the knife in some sort of karmic retribution in a way. Like this is penance that you're paying. But a lot of guys, you can look at the number of CEOs and sure, guys that outperform on the top end, yep. But that's not necessarily due to privilege. It's because putting yourself in that position to do what you need to do to get yourself to the position of being a founder, being a CEO, running a successful company is so fucking insane that most women would just choose to not go and do that. You're talking about outliers. Evolutionary psychology says that men are nature's playthings, that there's more variability. There's more male geniuses, but there's also more male retards. And it's all well and good pointing to the number of CEOs and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all the rest of it.
This segment dismantles one of the biggest misconceptions out there, that men are still dominant because the richest people are men. But pointing to Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos doesn't explain what's happening to the average guy. Those are outliers, not role models. Becoming a founder or CEO is such a brutal, abnormal lifestyle that most people would never choose it. And that's the point. Male privilege at the top is masking a crisis at the bottom. We keep talking about glass ceilings, but we're ignoring the growing number of men stuck in the basement. Is it time to admit that the real privilege now might be adaptability, but not gender?
That doesn't help the guy who is really struggling and has had that run of bad luck and has been really struggling, trying to work on himself. And yeah, if women have a problem, a lot of the time we say, what can we do to fix society? Any other group. But if men are struggling, we say, what is it that men are doing where they can't fix themselves?
Yeah.
And in some ways that's inspiring. Like, guys want that sense of like, I can fucking do this. I can do this.
There's a brutal truth in this part. When women face challenges, the question is, how can we help? But when men struggle, the message is, what's wrong with you? That difference changes everything. It creates shame instead of support. And yeah, the idea that men should take responsibility is powerful, but only if the playing field is even. Right now, it's not. Young boys are being pushed into systems that don't fit them and blamed when they fail. What would happen if we treated male struggle the same way we treat every other social issue, with compassion and strategy instead of criticism?
Menace, but you said earlier on about fitness right wing, fast cars right wing. There was this thread on Reddit, I think in a left-leaning forum, that said, people of the left, can you give me a good example of who you think a positive male role model would be? And the top voted one was Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
What about Fabio?
You've had to go to a fantasy land
Right.
in order to be able to find somebody who's sufficiently pure.
This moment right here is crucial. The guest lays out some uncomfortable biological truths. Men are more impulsive, more risk-prone, more likely to drop out, get addicted, or end up in jail. That's not toxic masculinity. That's statistical reality. But our schools, our jobs, our expectations, they're all built for a conscientious, low-risk, highly organized brain, which is great, unless you're wired differently, and millions of men are. So what do we do with that? Do we reshape the system, or just punish the people who don't fit? This is the kind of question that challenges both progressives and conservatives. That's why it matters.
Succeeding and getting college degrees, and more men aren't going out and making as much money in their 20s.
I think that the current environment does not necessarily lend itself to the disposition that men have got. So they're less conscientious than women from a personality standpoint on average. That means that it's really difficult, comparatively, on average, for you to be able to remind yourself that you need to do the sort of homework. Men are more predisposed to addiction, they're more predisposed to using recreational drugs, they're more predisposed to being in jail, to all of the sort of gang stuff that people get drawn into.
This part is almost funny, until you realize how sad it is. When a Reddit thread asked for a strong, positive male role model, the top answer was Aragorn, a fictional sword-wielding king from Lord of the Rings, not a real person, not even someone from this century. Why? Because it's easier to imagine noble masculinity in fantasy than to find it in real life. The public space doesn't know what to do with strong, grounded, principled men anymore, unless they're fictional. So here's the big one. Who are the real male role models in 2025? Can you name one who's respected across the board? This episode delivered one of the most honest conversations about men in today's world, and it didn't pull any punches. From the gender reversal in college degrees, to the cultural blind spots around male mental health, to the role model, vacuum. Nobody wants to admit exists. This wasn't just a podcast. It was a cultural intervention. What stood out is how rarely we hear these points spoken with clarity and nuance. It's not about blaming women or idolizing the past. It's about asking real questions that society keeps dodging. If this episode challenged your thinking, hit like, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and make sure to subscribe. These are the conversations that need to go mainstream.